Diare, and welcome to the 6th video of our series History Lessons with RedWineLover17. In the last video I introduced you to the British Tier 5 cruiser HMS Leander. We are now on to Tier 6 and today we are looking at the light cruiser HMS Fiji. To this day, the Fiji is the only ship of the Royal Navy to bear this name. In view of her tragic history, however, this is not entirely absurd, but more on that later. The 169.3 meter long, 18.9 meter broad ship with a draught of 6 meters was the namesake ship for the Fiji subclass of the Crown Colony class. The 11 light cruisers of the Crown Colony class were all named after crown colonies of the British Empire. The first 8 ships belonged to the Fiji subclass, the 3 slightly modified later ships to the Ceylon subclass. The Fiji had a range of 11,580 kilometers at a speed of 13 knots, i.e. 24 kilometers per hour. The ship's top speed was 33 knots, the equivalent of 61 kilometers per hour. In-game, the ship is slightly faster, reaching 33.8 knots. The in-game 4x3 152mm guns correspond to reality, as well as the 4x2 102mm secondary battery, the 12 40mm anti-aircraft guns, and the 6 533mm torpedo tubes. Only the other anti-aircraft guns have been spared a little in the game, but that makes them about faster. The keel of the Fiji was laid on 30th March 1938. I don't think we've ever discussed this before, but what exactly is the keel laying? Well, it's the beginning of the construction of a ship, so to speak. The keel is the most important longitudinal connection of a ship, located in the middle of the floor, comparable to the spine of a human being. The transverse stabilizing ribs are then attached to the keel. So when you start building a ship, you first lay down the keel and then you build it. In any case, 14 months after the keel was laid down, the launch of the Fiji took place, and just under another year later, the ship was commissioned by the Royal Navy as the first ship of the Crown class. This is why the Crown class is often referred to as the Fiji class, but this is actually incorrect. As we've already heard, the first 8 ships of the Crown class belonged to the Fiji subclass. The 3 later ships of the Crown class, however, did not. Initially, the Fiji was assigned to the Home Fleet, which task was to protect the territorial waters of Great Britain. On 31st August, however, she moved to the African Atlantic coast to take part in Operation Menace. The aim was to take control of the strategically important port of Dakar in French West Africa, now Senegal, and wrest it from Vichy, France. However, before the Fiji could join the battle group, she was so badly damaged on 1st September by a torpedo hit from the German submarine U-32, which was on its 7th enemy voyage, that she had to return to England for repairs and was out of action for about 6 months. The torpedo had hit the Fiji across the boiler room, flooding it and the adjacent compartment as well. This not only reduced the speed of the Fiji to 11 knots, i.e. 20 kilometers per hour, but also heeled her back. She also heeled to port, which meant she was deeper in the water on one side than the other, causing her to twist when steering. To compensate for this, the ammunition of the front guns and the port torpedoes were thrown overboard. In March 1941, the repairs were completed and the Fiji was put on patrol in the Strait of Denmark to track down German merchant raiders. On 26th and 27th March, the Fiji could have become famous in the process, but missed the returning armored cruiser Admiral Scheer, named after our Captain Reinhard Scheer. In April, the Fiji was then attached to Force H at Gibraltar to block the German heavy cruisers at Brest. Together with Force H, the Fiji sailed to the Mediterranean in late April to ensure the supply of the island of Malta by convoys. Following this, the ship was involved in the airborne battle in Crete, which we will now discuss in more detail. British intelligence suspected German attack on Crete on 17th May. So Admiral Andrew Cunningham, the Andrew Cunningham, had his ships ready for action on 15th May. The Fiji's task, along with the light cruiser Gloucester and Force B, was to patrol west of Crete. The landing of the German paratroopers began on 20th May, when the Fiji and Force B were on the way to the battleships Warspite and Valiant, together with their escort ships. The joining took place the next morning, and only a few hours later the first German air raids on the ships were launched. These had little effect, except of course to consume British anti-aircraft ammunition. In the afternoon, Cunningham ordered the ships to disperse again and return to their original groups. Force B with the Fiji was now to search the Aegean for troop convoys. They did not discover any, but instead Force B was tracked down shortly after sunrise on 22nd May and again harassing airstrikes when it was actually on its way southward for another joining up with other battle groups. The Fiji was not directly hit in the attacks, but a near hit destroyed its anti-aircraft director. That's a system for calculating flight path. Force B merged with Force A1 and Force D at 8:30. At this point, the Fiji could still draw on 30% of her original anti-aircraft ammunition, the Gloucester only 18%. And although some of the Force D cruisers were ordered to Alexandria to replenish their ammunition, Gloucester and Fiji had to remain behind with Force A1. At 12:25, Force A1 under Rear Admiral Rawlings received a request for assistance from Rear Admiral Edward E. Stuart King to support the damaged HMS Naiad and the remainder of his Force C. So Force A1 finally set off and reached Force C between 13:30 and 14. As Edward King was the senior admiral, he took the lead of the amalgamation, while fierce air raids put the British on the spot. At 13:50, the destroyer Greyhound was sunk and the two destroyers Kandahar and Kingston were to rescue the survivors, so Fiji and Gloucester were tasked with providing anti-aircraft support to the two destroyers shortly after 2 p.m. What King did not know, however, was that the ammunition shortage of the Gloucester and Fiji became vital. At 14:13, he was advised of this by Rawlings and finally ordered the cruisers to withdraw at 14:57, so more than 30 minutes later. However, the Air Force continued to focus on the 4 ships that were to take care of Greyhound survivors and continued to fly attacks against Fiji, Gloucester, Kandahar and Kingston for hours. By 15:30, while the Fiji was trying to rejoin Force A1, it had already expended all its live 102mm anti-aircraft ammunition and could only fire non-sharp practice ammunition. At 15:50, the Gloucester was hit by 4 bombs and narrowly missed by 3, so the Fiji launched her lifeboats to give the Gloucester survivors a chance, but had to retreat further along with the destroyers. At 7 p.m, a bomb from a messenger fleet BF-109 hit the Fiji amidships. The forward boiler room and engine compartments flooded and she was badly battered. Despite the damage, the Fiji was able to maintain a speed of 80 knots or 33 km per hour, until she had to stretch another bomb hit from a Messerschmitt and became back at 30 degrees. The Fiji was lost, and the evacuation of the ship was ordered before the Fiji finally capsized at 19:30. The escorting destroyers were able to recover 523 survivors from the Fiji late after the German air raids had finally ceased. 241 crew members had gone down with the Fiji. Among them was her captain Kit Tanner, who was posthumously awarded the Albert Medal, the predecessor of the George Cross, for his efforts in saving the Gloucester crew. On 30th May 1941, Andrew Cunningham wrote to the first support, Sir Dudley Pound. The sending back of Gloucester and Fiji to Greyhound was another grave error and cost us those 2 ships. They were practically out of ammunition, but even had they been full up, I think they would have gone down. The commanding officer of Fiji told me that the air over Gloucester was black with planes. However, the British Admiralty did learn one lesson from the tragic end of the Fiji. was subsequently forbidden for all British cruisers to engage in combat with less than 40% anti-aircraft ammunition. With that said, our video on HMS Fiji comes to an end as well. If you liked the video, please subscribe to our channel and give us a like. We'll be back with more gameplay videos soon, as well as the next ship of the line, Tier 7 light cruiser. See you soon, and dere!